A few videos back, I took a look at an incident that occurred in Zimbabwe. An event that saw a group of schoolchildren witness an alien craft land and the occupants emerge and warn them about humanity's future. One question that many of you asked is, where are these children today? I did some digging and I did find a few of the schoolchildren who still talk about their experience at UFO events and conventions. So let's take a look. Welcome to IF, videos on history and mystery. Hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you never miss a video again. One of the students still talking about what happened on that historical day is Sarah. She was tracked down to a bar in the downtown area of Harare in the capital of Zimbabwe. Being tracked down by a reporter researching the 1994 alien landing, she relayed to the investigator that she believed that she was the only one of the 110 witnesses that still lived in the country. The following is the transcript of her conversation. Everyone's left for Canada or the UK, or they have died. At this point, it said others listening into the interview interrupted saying, "Not this alien stuff again." This shows that the witnesses were probably subjected to much ridicule from the local community and may go some way to explaining why they have all left for other countries. Getting back to the chat with Sarah, with a look of condemnation for the others in the bar and ignoring the hushed mutterings, she continued with her story. "What do you want to know? Actually, it'd be simpler if I just shoot. It happened, okay?" Sarah snapped. Continuing, she said, "The 62 of us were between the ages of about 6 and 12. We saw the aliens land. They got out of their little ships. Us kids were freaked out and couldn't stop talking about the little men who oddly looked a bit like Michael Jackson. The teachers told us to shut up and classes proceeded. The next day, the school received a bunch of calls from parents wanting to know why their kids were spooked. It got so that the teachers started to freak out too, and a local UFO expert called Cynthia Hind, a woman I talk more about in the first video, was invited to speak to everyone. It was via her, I think, that we heard about a famous shrink who was coming from the US to assess the children." Sarah sorts through her memories. What was his name now? Mack? Dr. John Mack, who I heard was killed by a drunk driver a few years back, she proclaimed. I looked extensively at John Mack and his life in part 1, so let's take a closer look at Cynthia Hind. Hind sadly passed away in 2000. She was an avid ufologist and had publicly acknowledged her own experiences with otherworldly beings. She spent half of her life investigating UFO sightings on the African continent. She worked with groups such as MUFON, publishing her findings in the very collectible newsletter UFO Afri News. The interviewer took one of these newsletters to show Sarah the article, UFO Flap in Zimbabwe, case number 95. The printout reads as follows. Wednesday, 14th September 1994 was an exciting night for South Africa. Round about 2050 to 2105 hours, a pyrotechnic display of some magnificence appeared in almost clear night skies of this part of the continent. Astronomers across the region soon reported that the pyrotechnic display, seen as far afield as Zambia and Botswana, had been a meteor shower. Hind, though, recorded receiving dozens of reports of a capsule-like fireball trailing fire and flanked by 2 smaller capsules. The report also included many alien sightings around the same time. Hind's report closely matches Sarah's recollection of the incident. Hind writes, "On a hot day at 10 a.m, the children were let out for their mid-morning break. They were drawn to the area beyond the playing field of long grass with thorn and other indigenous bushes, trees, all growing in a higgledy-piggledy manner, and the undergrowth thick and heavy enough to hide a child should he or she venture there. 3 or 4 objects coming into the rough bush area, disc-like objects coming in along the power lines and finally landing in the rough among the trees. The children were a little bit afraid, although they were also curious. Hind relayed the broad range of ages and backgrounds of these child witnesses. Again, if you would like to know more on that, give part 1 a watch. In the report, she notes that some of the students thought that the short little beings were Vic Wambo or Tokoloshes, the evil goblins of Shona and Ndebele folklore. They burst into tears, fearing they would be eaten. Most reported seeing the same little men, about a meter tall, dressed in a black, shiny suit. They had long black hair and eyes, which seemed lower on their cheeks than our eyes. These were large and elongated. Their mouths were just slits, and their ears were hardly discernible. Hind finishes her report in outrage at the disbelief displayed by some of the children's parents. What a frightening indicament of our society that when we are confronted by something we don't understand, we don't even attempt to open our minds to the event, she wrote. Sarah went on to say, "To be perfectly honest, I don't think you would be here talking to me now if it wasn't for her. What happened at Ariel was certainly weird. So many kids coming back from break with such similar stories, but I doubt many people would have heard about it if Hind hadn't made such a fuss. She was the first person to interview the kids and got the news out to all sorts of important people, Mack included, as if, finally, here was some vindication. It would seem that Sarah clings to the support that was shown to her by Mack and Hind. But does this feeling apply to all witnesses? Another of the children from that day is Emily. Emily tells how she was only a few feet away from the beings and believes she was given messages. To this day, she says the incident still affects her. Emily is an avid artist, and she has been drawing mysterious and beautiful images that she feels are a manifestation of the messages she received from the extraterrestrials. Emily tells her story. I was a witness from the Ruwa, Zimbabwe event. I was just over 8 years old when this happened. I was born in Canada. I'm from a family of 5. I have a brother and a sister. My brother was also at the school during the time of the event. My parents are missionaries from the Salvation Army. That's why we were there in Ruwa, Zimbabwe. We were in Zaire before that. Then we went to Zim and we all attended Ariel, which was a lovely school. I'm really thankful for that experience, putting aside the UFO phenomenon. It was a beautiful place to live and to be. So, on that day, I can only speak about my perspective and where I was. Every child was in a different area of the playground, but it was recess and broad daylight, and we were just doing our normal thing, playing games. There were boundary lines along the property, and one of the games my friend and I used to play was hopping on that boundary line. Then we heard a high-pitch frequency sound, and we saw a flash and then a craft. It's really hard to describe time at this point, so I don't know how long this all happened for. All I can tell you is that 2 beings were hopping along beside Lisa and I, and they were curious. They weren't touching the ground. They were almost mimicking us. All of a sudden, they were in front of us. I described them as being about arm's reach away, and we were frozen. Telepathic images started going across my face. Communication through the eyes. That's all I can really describe it as. It was just image after image after image. One of the other girls standing beside me, she got more communication about the environment, and for me, mine was more technology uses and the use of technology. Emily goes on to explain that she has continued to have experiences for most of her life. She says that the aliens appear to her in many ways, often inspiring her artwork. She said, "I'll just say that they can alter perception, so they can change to make you almost feel a bit more comfortable with what you've seen. The last encounter, there were greys. A face went back and forth between a being and a lion." A former teacher who had to console the children said, "We met up on many occasions after that and hugged and shook our heads and said that was the most amazing experience of our lives." Whereas another former student says he hasn't talked about the event to anyone because they'd probably think he's nuts. This judgment is something that almost all that have witnessed something from another world have experienced. Sarah highlights this stigma at the end of her interview, saying, "Do you want to know the real message here? The real message is that this stuff can brand you for life. It undermined Mack's credibility, became this huge unending thing for others, and it certainly screwed me up. I mean, try telling people that you live in a permanent fear of these things returning one day. Try telling them that you can actually sense when they're back in our atmosphere. They'll think you're a kook." What do you think about the continuing experiences of these witnesses? Are they, and did they, really see and communicate with extraterrestrials? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like what I do here on the channel, hit that red button, like and share. You can catch the latest by searching We Are If. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.